Goody gumdrops. Get us a cup of tea, would you, Errol?
Do you know who I am?
Grab hold of his legs. What do you think when I grab him by?
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back and Happy New Year. Throughout the holidays, a member of the channel kept on asking me to make patterns for Chukka boots. So Mr. Bang, here it is. But wait first, before that, let's talk a bit about the history of Chukka boots. Before World War II, this was what British colonial soldiers used to look like. They used to wear this monstrosity. Some of them who were stationed in Southern Africa for the war, however, took inspiration from what the locals were wearing and requisitioned something stylish, much more simple for their downtime. And hence, the Chukka boot was born, proving once again that some of the most stylish people and some of the best styles originate from Africa. Now let's make the pattern. As always, we start the design of our patterns with a mean form, and then we design a blank boot. So let's design a blank boot. So from the mean form, we found out that the heel height was about 4 cm. We'll trace out our mean form onto the right angle. Pay attention to where I have put the balls and the counterpoint. So the counterpoint is on the vertical line of the right angle and the ball is on the horizontal line. So we trace out the mean form. The line that runs from our vamp point to the ball is of course our vamp line. We divide that vamp line into two. We basically bisect the vamp line and draw our quarter line from the counterpoint to the middle of the vamp line. All of these are basic things that we have done in other tutorials. Now we draw a line from the heel to the ball, and then using this jig like this, we will draw a line parallel to that line that runs from the heel to the ball, but this time running from the instep. Then we will take a measurement of the heel from the heel to the instep. We take a measurement, as you can see, is 18 cm, dividing that distance by 2, which comes to 9 cm. We'll mark that distance on the line that ran from the instep. Then we'll draw a perpendicular line to pass through that line, to pass through that point. So this is a right angle to pass through that point that is half the distance from the heel to the instep. The height of our boot will be measured on this line, and in this case I want to use 14 cm for my boot. The boot will just be ankle length. So we'll draw a line, a horizontal line, horizontal to our baseline, and then measuring about 1 cm away from the instep, we will draw a vertical line, of course perpendicular to the baseline, from that point to connect to the top line. Then from the counterpoint, we extend the line. We draw also another vertical line to meet the top line. The top line, of course, is the line that marks the height of the boot. Then curving in just at around the instep and around the counterpoint, we will have our blank boot. Now the width of your top line is determined by the ankle girth. That is the circumference around the ankle of your wearer. In my case, it's exactly 26, which I will divide by 2 to get 13, and then indicate 13 on that top line. So the total width of my top line is about 13 cm, and that way the top of my boot will size me. It corresponds to the real dimensions on this last. So the last is exactly my size. I wear a size 45, which also is the reason why my ankle girth corresponds to the natural ankle girth that you would get if you just follow the dimensions of the last. No modifications needed. So this is our boot blank. Let me recap to show all that we did to get the boot blank. We drew a line from the heel to the ball, and then drew a line perpendicular to that line from the instep. Then we took a measurement of from the heel to the instep, divided that by 2, and marked it on that line. Then we drew a perpendicular line to pass through that point and measured the height of our boot from the feather edge up until how high we wanted the boot to get. Ankle length for me was about 14 cm. Then the width of the top line was exactly half the circumference around my ankle, which is the ankle girth. So doing all of that on your mean form will give you the blank boot. In fact, if you clean out all of these construction lines, you'd find that this is basically a blank boot. So let's begin the design of our Chukka boot on this blank boot. First of all, I draw a straight line from the van point to the tip and then the van point to the counterpoint. If we were designing a derby boot, we'll basically draw in the quarters. But since what we are designing is a Chukka boot, I will start the quarters of my Chukka about 1 cm behind the van point. Right. Now notice that this line that runs from the counterpoint to the middle of the vamp line is our quarter line. I'll start the front part of my before that. So that line over there just indicates to me where I can begin to take in the quarter of my Chukka boot. Now my Chukka boot doesn't have a closed quarter, so I need to find out how far from the center line it will go. I'm using 1/16 of the last length. Typically things that run across will be 1/8 of the last length, but because I don't want it going too far away from the center, I use 1/16 of the last length marked on this line that I drew. And then if I curve in this angle like so, I have basically drawn the major line of the quarter of my Chukka boot. All that remains to be done is 1/8 of the last length will give me about 3.6, which is the width of the tongue of our Chukka boot. So this is the middle of our vamp line, and then the width of the tongue should actually terminate about 1 cm beneath the middle of the vamp line. About 1.2 cm away from the center line, or from the front of the quarter of your Chukka boot, you can outline a line on which you are going to draw the eyelets of your Chukka. And since it's a Chukka boot, you don't need the 5 classics as you would have in a derby, but 3 spaced equidistantly will be okay for this case. So that's all of the design of this Chukka boot. It is a simplified type of derby boot, if I may say so. So I'm basically cutting out the standard pattern and cutting in the tracing channels. Let me explain a little bit better how the tongue of this Chukka boot was gotten. I said the width of the tongue is 1/8 of the last length, and that's about 3.6 cm. And it will terminate at a point just about 1 cm beneath the middle of the vamp line. So if you draw a line like so up to that point, you see that you have the tongue of your boot complete. So from here on in, I think all of the design is pretty much intuitive, and all that I'm going to do is to cut out the various parts of this boot so that you can see what everything looks like by the time we have cut all of them out. So this is the quarter, Of course, I won't forget to add about 2 cm of lasting allowance. Then I'll go ahead and add in I'll add just about 1 mm behind it to account for stitching allowance at the back seam. And then of course I won't forget to add the eyelets, and then just a design line around the quarter right there. So the second part of the pattern that we are going to cut is this part, like so, which is going to be the vamp part of the choker. Now, to make understanding what I did with this part easy, let me cut it out first. So you see that I have cut it out. So the quarter is going to slot into the vamp like so. The stitching allowance around here is a little bit too much, so let's cut out all of that excess and then cut in tracing channels to indicate the line where the stitching allowance will stop. Now, the key thing I wanted to point out to you is that in between the vamp line is an angle, not a straight line, but we need to straighten out that line in order to duplicate it, right? So what I do is I draw right angles on 2 points on either side of the vamp point. So that point and that point. I draw a right angle from this point and a right angle from that point. So there, and then also there. Then the next thing, I'm going to place those 2 points on the center line of the duplicate, the pattern that I want to duplicate. So those 2 points are on the straight line, and just this part I will draw in. Then I'll move the center to the center line and then rotate it so that that point meets there, and then rotate it back again and draw in the rest of this back part. So this way I have duplicated that pattern. Then I'll just go ahead and add my 2 cm of lasting allowance, and basically just add an extra corresponding part to just duplicate this pattern that you see, and I'll have my vamp pattern all done. So there it is. So that's my vamp pattern. The next thing, I'll do basically the same process with the tongue. Straighten out the tongue and duplicate it, and then all the major parts of this choker boot pattern would have been designed and cut. So this is the tongue, right? So this is the back side of the tongue. I'm going to use the same springing process to straighten it out and then duplicate it. So I mark 2 points on either side of the angle there, place those 2 points on a straight line, draw in that part. Let me use a piece of paper that can accommodate my pattern. So I draw in that part, move the center to the center line, draw in this part, and then rotate that. It's a little bit too tricky, more tricky with this one because it's not just one curve, it's about 2 curves. So I'll just keep rotating it until I basically align all of it on a straight line. It is the tongue, it is going to be covered by the quarter, so there are some little bits of error which really will be accommodated by the leather. So basically this is what the duplicated tongue will look like. I'll just cut that out. And once I cut that out, the pattern is all done. I guess the only thing that I did not include in this video is how I generated the flap, the back flap that covered the back seam. But that is easy, and I will leave you to figure out that by yourself. But basically, this is what our pattern pieces are going to look like. So there it is. I guess the other thing remaining to do is to do a test shoe, just to show you that the pattern actually worked, and we can confirm that everything is in order. So let's finish this off and see what it looks like.
Start it from here. To this. Then to this.